I just inherited this old farm from my grandfather. As a kid, I'd run around that place like it was a playground, but now, the whole vibe felt off. Darker, maybe? Like there was something out there I wasn't supposed to see. Anyway, my first night there, I'm unpacking, trying to get settled, when I see this weird light flickering out in the cornfield. I mean, it's late. Who the hell would be out there? At first, I thought it might just be a lantern or something. But it's moving in this strange way, almost like it's, I don't know, dancing? Freaked me out, but I brushed it off. It's nothing, I told myself. But it kept happening. Every night that damn light showed up again, and each time it got closer, like it was inching toward me, daring me to come out and see what the hell was going on. One night I'm in the barn just trying to wrap up some work when I hear footsteps behind me. Now this is an empty-ass barn, mind you, and I'm alone. I whip around expecting someone to be there, but there's nobody. Not a damn soul. The place is empty. But I swear I felt eyes on me, like someone was standing there just watching me. And the light? Yeah, that kept going too. Every damn night. At this point, I'm losing sleep. I'd sit by the window with all the lights off, just staring out at this creepy glow out in the field, feeling like it was calling me. And let me tell you, I don't scare easy, but whatever was out there was seriously starting to get under my skin. Finally, one night I said, screw it, and grabbed a flashlight. I head out there thinking maybe it's a neighbor messing with me or some dumb prank, but the closer I get to that light, the colder it gets, and I don't mean chilly, I mean cold. My breath was fogging up in front of me, and it was the middle of summer. It made no sense. And then I start hearing whispers, little voices coming from the corn. I'm telling myself, nah, it's just the wind, man. But I wasn't convincing anybody, least of all myself. I kept walking, though, like an idiot, right into the field, and that's when I see it. It's not a lantern, it's not a flashlight. It's this figure. Tall, thin, draped in some kind of dark cloak. And the light, it's coming from inside of it like it's glowing. And it's just standing there, facing away from me. I froze. I'm not even kidding. My legs felt like they were cemented to the ground. And then it turns around. I couldn't see a face or anything, just this blank, dark shape with that light shining out. And that was it. I bolted. I ran like my life depended on it, right back to the house, locked every door and window, and just sat there shaking. Next morning, I packed my stuff, got in my truck, and got the hell out. Didn't even look back. I don't care what anyone says, that farm can stay haunted as far as I'm concerned. There's stuff out there that we're not supposed to understand, and I'm not about to try. Surrounded by the constant noise and chaos. One day, my girlfriend and I decided to ditch the concrete jungle and move to a secluded farm we found online. The listing had photos of beautiful pastures, an old farmhouse, and a barn that looked like it had stories to tell. It seemed perfect until we actually got there. As soon as we pulled up, I felt that little shiver down my spine. The farmhouse was beautiful, but the moment we stepped inside, it was like the air changed. You ever walk into a place and just feel off? Yeah, that was it. I shook it off. I mean, it was an old house. Of course, it was going to have its quirks. The first couple of nights were fine. We unpacked, set up our things, and settled into our new life. But then weird stuff started happening. At first, it was just small things, like I'd leave a tool in one spot, and the next morning, it would be gone. I figured my girlfriend was just moving things around, but she swore she hadn't touched anything. Then came the footsteps. One night I was in the living room watching TV, and I kept hearing this soft thud, thud, thud coming from the back of the house. I thought maybe it was just the old house settling, but it was too rhythmic. It sounded like someone was walking back and forth. I shrugged it off, thinking I was just being paranoid. But then I heard it again, this time louder. It was like someone was pacing the floor. I got up to check it out, but when I walked into the hallway, it went silent. I stood there for a moment, just listening, and then I saw it. A shadow moving at the edge of my vision. I turned my head and it was gone. My girlfriend was in the kitchen and I didn't want to freak her out, so I played it cool. "Hey, did you hear that?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Hear what?" she replied, pouring a glass of water. I decided not to mention the shadow. I didn't want to sound like some crazy person, but it was eating at me. Over the next few days, I started noticing something else. Every morning, there would be muddy footprints leading from the barn to the house. We didn't have any animals, so I had no idea where they were coming from. My girlfriend thought maybe it was just some wildlife, but I wasn't so sure. One evening, I was out in the barn trying to fix up some old equipment. I kept glancing at the door, feeling like someone was watching me. Just as I was about to head back inside, I saw him, a tall, lanky guy standing at the edge of the barn. He looked like he just walked out of a ghost story. Worn-out overalls, a straw hat, and a face that looked like it hadn't seen sunlight in ages. "Hey, you need help with that?" he called, his voice echoing strangely in the barn. I was taken aback. No thanks, I'm good," I shouted back, but when I turned around to grab my tools, he was gone. Just like that. I blinked and looked around, thinking maybe he had just moved behind a pile of hay or something. But nope, nothing. Just me in the barn. When I went inside, I told my girlfriend about it, and she laughed it off. "Maybe it was a neighbor, babe. You know how these rural places are, right? Everyone knows each other," she said. But I didn't think so. There was something about that guy that felt wrong. It was like he didn't belong in this world. Days turned into weeks, and the strange occurrences kept piling up. I kept seeing that same figure out of the corner of my eye, always just standing there, never getting closer. And the muddy footprints? They kept showing up every morning. I even started leaving my phone out to try and capture a picture, but every time I did, the camera would just glitch out, like it didn't want to show anything. One night, after a long day of work, I was exhausted. I crashed on the couch while my girlfriend was in the kitchen. I don't know how long I was out, but I woke up to the sound of someone whispering. It was faint but clear enough that it pulled me from my sleep. I shot up, my heart racing, and glanced around the room. "Babe, are you here?" I called, my voice shaky. No answer. The whispering continued, and I could swear it was coming from outside. I grabbed my flashlight and headed toward the door, adrenaline pumping. I stepped outside, and that's when I saw him again, standing at the edge of the yard, illuminated by the moonlight. "What the hell do you want?" I shouted, my voice echoing in the stillness of the night. He didn't respond, just stood there motionless, staring right at me. That's when I noticed his eyes. They were hollow, dark. I stumbled back, fear clawing at my throat, and turned to run back inside. As I bolted for the door, I heard him call out, "You can't run from the past!" I slammed the door shut behind me, heart racing, and locked it tight. I turned to my girlfriend, who had just come out of the kitchen, looking confused. "What's wrong?" she asked. I tried to explain, but the words wouldn't come. I felt crazy, like I was losing my mind. So I just shook my head and told her I was fine. But I wasn't. I was terrified. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I decided I needed to find out who that guy was, so I drove into town and asked around. The locals were friendly but looked at me like I was nuts. They said they didn't know anyone that matched that description. But one old man leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "You know, there used to be a farmhand that worked the fields here years ago. He disappeared without a trace. Some say he still wanders the land, looking for something he lost." I couldn't believe it. Could this be the same guy I saw? I didn't want to go back to the farm, but I felt like I had to. I had to face whatever was out there. When I got back, I gathered my courage and went out to the barn. I wanted to confront this phantom farmhand once and for all. I called out, "Show yourself, I'm not afraid of you." Silence. Just the wind rustling through the cornfields. And then, from behind me, I heard a soft chuckle. "You think you can face the past?" It was his voice, closer now. I whipped around, but there was no one there. My heart dropped and panic set in. I bolted back inside, slammed the door, and locked it tight. I knew I had to get out of that place. This wasn't just some harmless ghost. It was something dark, something angry. I packed my things, and as I was leaving, I glanced back at the barn one last time. And there he was, standing in the doorway, watching me leave with those hollow eyes. I stepped into my car, revved the engine, and drove away, never looking back. To this day, I still think about that farm and that phantom farmhand. Sometimes I wonder if he's still out there, wandering the fields, waiting for someone to acknowledge him, to help him find whatever it is he lost. But honestly, I'm not curious enough to find out. So, this happened about a year ago. I'd taken a job as a seasonal worker on a farm during the fall. They needed extra hands for the harvest season, and I needed the cash, so it was perfect. Or at least, that's what I thought at the time. The farm was huge, with fields stretching out as far as the eye could see. Cornfields, pumpkin patches, even a little apple orchard. But something about it was unsettling. The main farmhouse was old and run down, looking more like it belonged in a horror movie than real life. And the owner, Mr. Wallace, was a quiet, stern guy. He didn't talk much, which was fine by me. Just show me where to work and let me get to it. The other workers, though, they weren't as friendly as I'd expected. Most of them kept to themselves, working in silence, heads down. But there was one guy, Rob, who seemed a little more open. One day, we were taking a break, sitting by the edge of the field, and he turned to me, looking dead serious. "You ever hear of the Red Harvest?" he asked. I laughed, thinking he was joking. "What? Is that supposed to be like a Halloween thing?" But he didn't laugh, just stared at me with this dead look in his eyes. "It's not a joke. They say once every few years the fields turn red. It's a sign, a bad one. People disappear." I rolled my eyes, figuring he was just trying to mess with the new guy. "Yeah, okay, sure. Whatever you say, man." But as the days went by, I couldn't get his words out of my head. I'd find myself looking around, scanning the fields, half expecting to see something strange. And sometimes, when the sun was setting, the light would hit the fields just right, giving them a weird reddish glow. I'd brush it off as nothing, but it still left me with this uneasy feeling. Then one night, everything changed. It was late, and we'd all been working overtime trying to finish up the pumpkin patch. By the time I was done, it was pitch dark out, and I was one of the last to leave. As I was walking back to the bunkhouse, I felt like someone was watching me. You know that feeling where the hairs on the back of your neck stand up? Yeah, it was like that. I looked over my shoulder, and in the distance, I saw a figure standing at the edge of the cornfield. I couldn't make out any details, but they were just standing there. Not moving, not calling out, just watching. I told myself it was probably just one of the other workers, maybe Rob playing some kind of sick prank. But as I kept walking, I started hearing these strange sounds, whispering, faint and barely audible, coming from the cornfield. My pulse quickened, and I walked faster, not wanting to stick around and find out what it was. The next day I asked around, trying to see if anyone else had seen anything weird. Most of them just shrugged, but Rob pulled me aside. "I told you, didn't I? The Red Harvest. It's happening." At this point, I didn't know what to think. I tried to laugh it off, but Rob wouldn't drop it. "Tonight's the night," he said, his voice low. "You'll see it if you stay late enough." I told him he was full of it, but his words stayed with me. That night, curiosity got the best of me. I decided to stay behind after the others left to see what all the fuss was about. The farm was dead silent. No animals, no birds, nothing. Just me and the endless rows of corn. I started to feel like I'd made a mistake, like maybe this wasn't something I wanted to know about after all. But it was too late. The sun had set, and everything around me was drenched in darkness. Then I saw it, the glow. At first, it was faint, just a soft, reddish tint over the fields. But as the minutes ticked by, it grew brighter. I watched in horror as the entire field seemed to be drenched in a bloody red light. And that's when I saw them. Figures moving through the corn. They weren't people. I don't know what they were. Shadowy forms, like silhouettes, but distorted, flickering in and out of sight. They moved slowly, almost like they were searching for something or someone. I was frozen, rooted to the spot. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't cooperate. One of the figures turned and started moving toward me. Its face, or what should have been its face, was just a blank void, like a shadow without a source. I could feel its gaze, even though it didn't have eyes. It was as if it was pulling me in, drawing me toward it. Finally, my fight or flight kicked in. I turned and bolted, running as fast as I could back toward the bunkhouse. But as I ran, I realized the whispering was getting louder, surrounding me. It was like they were everywhere, closing in on me. When I burst through the door, I slammed it shut behind me, gasping for breath. The whispers stopped, but the red glow was still visible through the windows. I pulled the blinds, trying to block it out, trying to forget what I'd just seen. But the fear, it didn't go away. And the next morning, I packed my bags and left without saying a word to anyone. Rob was the only one who seemed to understand. As I was walking away, he called after me. "They always come back, you know, every harvest. Doesn't matter how far you go." I've tried to forget what I saw, to tell myself it was just some elaborate prank, or maybe a hallucination from exhaustion. But every fall, as the leaves start to turn, I can feel it. That same dread creeping up on me, like something's watching, waiting. I'll never go back to that farm, not for all the money in the world. Whatever was out there in those fields, it wasn't human, and every time autumn rolls around, I can't shake the feeling that it's still out there, waiting for someone else to join the harvest. 3 chilling real-life horror stories straight from the farmlands. These stories are a reminder that sometimes the scariest things aren't found in haunted houses or dark alleyways, but out in the fields, the barns, and the silence of the countryside. After hearing these tales, it makes you wonder, what would you do if you found yourself face to face with something you couldn't explain? Would you run, or would you stick around to see what happens? Let me know down in the comments if you've ever had an experience that left you with chills. Maybe it was out on a farm, or maybe it was somewhere just as isolated and eerie. I'd love to hear your stories, so drop them below. And hey, if you enjoyed these stories and want to see more creepy content, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. I've got plenty more spooky tales coming your way, and you won't want to miss them. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes it's best to leave the mysteries of the night right where they are.